Less Taken contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Listeners' discretion is advised.
Less Taken.
Please help us!
Minutes after midnight, a desperate mother dredges through the flooded streets of Atchison, Kansas. An aggressive thunderstorm overhead. Carrying her 6-year-old daughter in her arms, the mother continues to run through the night. Cutting over to 2nd Street, she finally starts to slow down and catch her breath, although the latter is much more difficult than it might seem. Her arms are numb from the weight of her daughter, but she's never letting go, not even when it feels like her arms are separating from her shoulders. Lightning splits the sky, momentarily illuminating the weathered wooden siding and the small covered front porch of a rectangular 2-story home with a pitched roof. Doing her best to make sense of the address in the darkness, she stops in front of the building she believes to be 508 North 2nd Street. The mother takes her chances and races up to the porch. She pounds at the front door until Dr. Charles Finney, half asleep and disheveled, greets her from inside. Panic. A stream of disconnected sentence fragments pours out of the mother's mouth until the doctor can calm her down enough to hear the words,
My Sally might be dying. It's her signs.
The doctor opens the door and urges the mother to bring her daughter inside. Her boots quack along the hardwood floor. Every bit of the storm can be seen through 2 large windows in the living room, which comes into full view with every brilliant strike of lightning. She explains that her little Sally has had a fever and chills all day. She complains of severe pain all along her abdomen, but the worst of it comes from her lower right side. Her daughter says sometimes the pain goes away for a bit, but it always comes back in full force. The doctor has an idea of what's going on, and after quickly examining Sally, he concludes it must be the young girl's appendix troubling her. It might have even ruptured already. They need to rush her downstairs to his lab, where he can operate on her before things get out of control. The 3 of them make it into the downstairs lab in record time, and Dr. Finney quickly brings Sally over to his operating table. He assures the mother that everything is going to be fine. He's done this exact procedure 1,000,000 times before.
Isn't that why you came to me?
He asks her. The mother nods her head and tries to conceal her worried shoulders and concerned whimpers as Dr. Finney administers the anesthesia. They both wait for the medication to kick in.
Should be ready,
the doctor says as he collects his tools. The mother disagrees. Sally doesn't appear to be unconscious. She's not too sure that her daughter's even numb.
We don't have time,
Dr. Finney says as he begins to mark his incision points.
She won't feel any pain.
Sally squirms and screams in agony as Dr. Finney makes the first cut along her abdomen, and then another. Her mother wants to scream too, but she's not even sure what she's seeing is real. She's so disconnected. This can't be real, can it? This has to be a nightmare. Maybe she's had a fever too. She's been so focused on Sally that, who knows, maybe she's been sick this entire time. Maybe the fever is starting to make her delusional. Sally's mother wants to kill this doctor, but she doesn't. She doesn't move. She doesn't speak. She doesn't do anything other than stare at her daughter's blood pooling up on the concrete floor, Then, all the commotion stops. Sallie stops convulsing. She doesn't move at all.
You killed her!
Her mother screams across the cellar, snapping out of her trance-like state.
No.
Dr. Finney replies, "She's alive. She's still alive. Come check for yourself." Sallie's mother remains frozen at the far side of the basement for several moments before she finally heads toward the operating table. Once she arrives, Dr. Finney asks her to reach along Sallie's neck.
There's a pulse!
Her mother says, a hint of relief in her voice. But she knows that pulse is fading.
Why is she like this? What have you done?
The doctor informs Sallie's mother he didn't do anything wrong. In fact, the procedure was a great success. The only issue is that Sallie's anesthesia waited until damn near the end of the operation to settle in.
Sallie is sleeping. That's all. She just needs some rest.
So Dr. Finney and Sallie's mother let her slumber. Hours pass by, and then days. They wait for Sallie's meds to fade, but they never do. While his intention was to act swiftly and potentially save Sallie's life, the doctor administered far too much anesthesia. They can wait all they want, but Sallie is never waking up. You're listening to Sallie Part 1, the 9th story from Less Taken, Season 3. In this episode, we explore the horrific events that unfurl when a family moves into the infamous Sallie house with intentions of turning it into their dream home. In Part 1, we'll cover a bit of the house's background, the family's background, and the unsettling paranormal events that unfurl with no end in sight. Please let us know what you think of Less Taken by leaving us a fair rating and a review wherever you're listening. You can also submit reviews at our official website, lesstakenpod.com. There, you'll find all of our episodes, sources, additional information, media, and more. One more thing you can do on the site is scroll down to the bottom of the homepage and submit your ideas for future episodes of Less Taken. Be sure to follow us before we follow you on social media under the handle @lesstakenpod. I'm Sam Humphreys, and this is Less Taken, real-life horror stories from the Midwest. Once again, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy Sallie, Part 1 from Less Taken, Season 3. December 1992, 508 North 2nd Street, Atchison, Kansas. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the quiet street, Tony and Deborah Pickman pull up to their new house with a mix of excitement and anticipation. Their move has been underway for some time now, but they're almost wrapped up and ready to introduce their newborn to their new home. Before them stands a modest 2-story structure with a quaint covered porch flush with the walkway. The house, built in the mid-1800s, exudes a vintage charm that immediately captivates them. Tony steps out of the car, cradling their infant son Taylor in his arms. Deborah follows, her eyes wide with excitement and a hint of nervousness. They walk up to the front door, and Tony fumbles with the keys for a moment before unlocking the deadbolt. The door swings open and reveals a living room that seems rather cozy, with worn hardwood floors and large windows that let in the last rays of the setting sun. The air inside is cool, carrying the faint scent of an aged wood and something else, something they can't quite place. Later that evening, they make their way upstairs, the old staircase groaning with each step. Taylor's room is at the end of the hall, a small but bright space with a single window overlooking the backyard. Tony gently places Taylor in his crib, the baby gurgling happily as he looks up at his parents. Deborah leans over, brushing a soft kiss on Taylor's forehead. A sudden chill fills the room, causing Deborah to shiver. She glances at Tony, who is rubbing his arms as if to ward off the cold. They exchange a look but say nothing, both attributing it to the quirks of an old house. As they continue to unpack and settle in, the feeling of being watched lingers. They don't know why, but it does. It's an unspoken presence that seems to follow them from room to room. Despite the odd chill, the Pickmans are determined to make the house their home. They spend the evening unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, and dreaming about their future in this charming, albeit slightly eerie, old house. As night falls, they finally settle into bed, exhausted but still feeling content about purchasing this home. Tony wraps his arms around Deborah, pulling her in close. They drift off to sleep, unaware of the dark presence that lurks in the shadows, waiting to make itself known. Taylor sleeps peacefully in his crib upstairs. The house is still, save for the occasional creak of the old wooden floors. Deborah's in the kitchen, unpacking dishes, while Tony sits in the living room, flipping through some magazines that happen to survive their move to the new home. Suddenly, a soft thud echoes from Taylor's room. Tony looks up, alarmed. Again, he dismisses it with something simple as the old house settling, and he returns to his reading. A few minutes later, there's another thud, louder this time. Tony and Deborah exchange looks, a silent question passing between them. Tony stands and heads upstairs to check on Taylor. As he reaches the top of the stairs, the air feels colder again, heavier, still. He pushes the door to Taylor's room open and freezes. The light is on when Tony's certain they turned it off. Taylor's stuffed animals, which had been neatly arranged on a shelf, are now sitting in a circle on the floor. The mobile above the crib spins slowly, though there is no breeze. Tony steps into the room, his heart pounding. He picks up one of the stuffed animals and places it back on the shelf. Before leaving the room, he flips the light switch off again. By the time he reaches the bottom of the staircase, Tony hears another thud. He pivots back up the stairs and barges into Taylor's room. Once more, the light is on, and the stuffed animals are strewn across the floor. "15 minutes later, Tony and Deborah are startled by the sound of their family dog barking incessantly, somewhere upstairs. Deborah races to the top of the staircase, still worried about all the other commotion they heard earlier. Turning the corner, she finds their dog standing stiff in front of the nursery, aggressively barking at the door, but too afraid to enter the room. This time, the light is still off, but once more, all of the stuffed animals are littered across the room. She stands there, the weight of the house pressing down on her with an air of some unspoken presence, something unseen but undeniably there. To her, the feeling of being watched is palpable. Deborah and Tony decide to gather Taylor and head into the master bedroom for the rest of the night, their dog at the foot of the bed, standing guard. Deborah's sense of unease returns, twice as strong. Before they call it a night, Tony walks over to the bedroom door and locks it tightly. This old house, once their symbol of hopeful new beginnings, is starting to feel like a place of rogue shadows and disembodied whispers. Unfortunately, this strange occurrence is merely a series of events that will test their strength, their courage, their love, and their sanity. The house is unusually quiet, save for the gentle hum of an air conditioner. Tony lies sprawled on the couch, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm as he naps. His wife, Deborah, sits nearby, engrossed in a book, occasionally glancing at her husband as he groans in his sleep. Suddenly, Tony stirs. His eyelids flutter open, revealing a distant and almost vacant gaze. Deborah looks up from her book, sensing some kind of change in the room. Tony's eyes lock onto hers, and for a moment, it feels as though he looks right through her into some unseen realm beyond her shoulders. "He's mine," Tony murmurs, his voice low, gravelly, and foreign to him. Deborah opens her mouth to respond, but Tony's eyes close again, and he drifts back into a deep sleep. Although Deborah is left shaken, she dismisses her husband's deep voice and uncanny words as part of a nightmare or a stress dream. Moving has been quite taxing, and she knows their sleepless infant has worn him down to some degree. She wonders if it's her that he's dreaming about. It would make sense. Nonetheless, there's a part of Deborah that can't help but wonder, is Tony talking about someone that belongs to him? Or is Tony saying he belongs to someone else now? Tony and Deborah's infant, Taylor, has been restless, his cries piercing the silence of nearly every night. Not that any of their evenings have been completely quiet to begin with. They wonder if most of it might have to do with the faulty wiring in the house. At least, they assume there's some sort of electrical issue. Lights and appliances have been turning on and off and malfunctioning ever since they showed up at the place. These flickering lights tend to form eerie shadows on the nursery walls, so it's no wonder that Taylor can't sleep. To him, there must be at least a dozen shadowy boogeymen encircling his crib every night. Tony and Deborah struggle to keep their chins up as they stand in the dimly lit hallway, the lights above them flashing erratically.
This can't go on.
Deborah whispers, her voice tinged with exhaustion and fear.
We need to do something.
The next morning, Tony and Deborah call an electrician. He arrives promptly, a middle-aged man with a reassuring smile and a toolbox. He spends hours inspecting the wiring, checking the fuse boxes, and testing the outlets. Finally, he emerges from the basement, wiping his hand on a rag. "Everything looks fine," he says, shrugging. "I can't find anything wrong." Although they don't believe him, perhaps he wasn't thorough enough, Deborah and Tony thank him for his time and show the electrician to the door. Later that night, as they settle into bed, the lights begin their ominous dance once more, and Taylor's cries echo throughout the house. After returning home from his night shift, Tony follows the smell of something burning into the living room, where he finds his wife Deborah standing over a candle on the table. The candle, still wrapped in its plastic packaging, has melted into a misshapen blob. In the wax, a small, delicate print is clearly visible. Deborah's eyes are wide with fear as she looks at Tony.
What is that?
She whispers, her voice trembling. The print looks like a tiny hand, pressed into the candle, as if by some unseen force, one hot enough to melt down into the wax. Tony's face can be seen by the soft glow of a nightlight near the nursery door. He stands by the crib, rocking Taylor to sleep. Suddenly, Tony feels a sharp burning sensation on his back. He winces, trying to ignore it, but the pain intensifies. He carefully places Taylor in the crib and steps back, his hand instinctively reaching for the source of his pain. His fingers brush against 3 fresh, angry red scratches. Tony's heart races as he catches the faint reflection of his back in the nursery mirror, the scratches clearly visible. He feels a cold chill run down his spine. The air feels heavy, oppressive. And again, he has the sensation of being watched. Tony's first encounter with this unseen force has him shaken. And the scratches on his back are a stark reminder that something malevolent lurks within the walls of their new home. The living room of the Pickman household is bathed in the golden hue of the late afternoon sun, filtering through lace curtains. There's a musty odor that seems to cling onto everything. Deborah and Tony sit nervously on the worn floral patterned couch, their eyes darting around the room. They've tried everything. An electrician came and went, leaving them baffled by the strange occurrences. The melted candle with the small handprint, another mystery they can't solve. Desperate for answers, Deborah makes a call that changes everything. Barbara Connors, a psychic medium, stands in the center of the room. Her eyes are closed and her hands are outstretched, fingers wavering slightly. Barbara's presence is calming, yet intense. She begins to speak softly as she senses the energy in the house. She mentions a young girl named Sally, who lived in the house many years ago and died tragically. Her spirit, Barbara explains, might still be present, seeking their attention. Deborah gasps, clutching Tony's hand tightly as his face pales. Barbara continues, describing how Sally's energy is strong and can be overwhelming, causing the disturbances the Pickmans have been experiencing. Tony shifts uncomfortably, glancing towards the nursery where many of the incidents have occurred. Barbara reassures them that Sally doesn't mean any harm, but she's simply trying to communicate. She advises them to acknowledge Sally's presence, speak to her, set boundaries, and remind her that this is their home now, and Sally needs to respect that. Deborah's eyes fill with tears as she looks at Tony, who nods with determination. As bizarre as it might seem, they both realize that understanding and addressing Sally's presence might very well be the first step toward finding peace in their home. Barbara offers her support, promising to help them through their unique situation. As Barbara's words sink in, the oppressive atmosphere in the room seems to lighten up, and the Pickmans feel a glimmer of hope. Tony and Deborah sit in the living room, the light of a lamp licking at the walls. Taylor is asleep, finally, and his cries are silenced for the moment. Then, the faint smell of smoke returns and travels through the air. Tony's nose twitches, and he looks around, puzzled. "Do you smell that?" he asks. Deborah nods with wide eyes. They rise from their seats, following the scent of the nursery. As they push the door open, both of their hearts nearly burst. There, in the middle of the room, a doll sits on the floor, its plastic face twisted in a grotesque grin. Flames whip at its dress, the fire seemingly coming from nowhere. Tony rushes forward, grabbing a blanket to smother the flames. Deborah stands frozen, her eyes fixed on the doll. The fire is quickly extinguished, but the damage is done. The doll's face is charred, its eyes melted into hollow sockets.
How did this happen?
Deborah whispers. Tony shakes his head. "I don't know. There's no way it could have just caught fire like that." A sense of dread settles over them as they stand at the center of the nursery. They stare down at the burnt doll, wondering if the house, or something or someone within it, is trying to give them a hint. Thank you for listening to Sallie Part 1, the 9th story from Less Taken, Season 3. Next Wednesday, we'll drop a preview of Part 2, in which we continue the story of the Pickman family inside of the Sallie house, including more strange encounters and attacks, more paranormal and psychic investigations, and where the house stands today. In the meantime, please let us know what you think of Less Taken by leaving a fair rating and review wherever you're listening. You can also submit reviews at our official website, lesstakenpod.com. There, you can also check out all of our episodes, sources, additional media, and more. We've got some new merch up in the store and special discounts on hats and t-shirts, so be sure to give the shop a gander while you're perusing the site. One more thing you can do on the site is scroll down to the bottom of the homepage and submit your ideas for future episodes of Less Taken. Be sure to follow us before we follow you on social media under the handle @lesstakenpod. You can find updates on Facebook, media and early previews on Instagram, and the occasional post on Threads, pretty much nothing on X. If you think we could use a TikTok or a YouTube, or just want to help us out with the social pages, hit us up. We're lesstakenpod@gmail.com. A quick note on our storytelling. While we do our best to stick to the facts when we tell our real-life horror stories, we sometimes take creative liberties to maintain narrative cohesiveness. I'm Seam Humphreys, and this is Less Taken, real-life horror stories from the Midwest. Once again, thanks for listening, and I hope you join us next Wednesday for a preview of Sallie, Part 2. The end of our 9th story from Less Taken, Season 3.